can't go on this, can it? It cannot go on.
It can go on. Erik ten Hag is the great survivor. He's been the United manager, I think, for 2 full seasons. I think he's lost something like 30, 34 games, and he's still got his job. I think the main reason he's got his job is because he won 2 trophies. They weren't the main trophies, the title or the European Cup, but he won the FA Cup and the Carabao Cup as well. I think that is the reason why he's still got a job. And he survived some really shocking performances and results. The infamous losing 7-0 to Liverpool at Anfield. He survived that. Just 4 days later, they beat Real Betis 4-1. So I think in the short term, United are backing him. But if United keep playing the way they did against Spurs yesterday, because to my eyes, it didn't really look like, especially in the first half, that the players were playing for the manager. Unless he sorts that out, then he knows himself that he's under pressure and he's under serious pressure of losing his job, because performances like that are totally unacceptable.
Right. You just said to me he kept his job because he won the FA Cup final. He beat a Manchester City side. Do questions not need to be asked from the football hierarchy that they've kept him in a job, given how dreadful United were last season, on the basis of 1 game of football?
Well, I think what Ineos would say is that it wasn't on the basis of 1 game of football. They would say that, OK, it was a very disappointing season. We finished 8th, but we won the FA Cup. After the FA Cup, we carried out a review. And during that review, we decided that Erik ten Hag was the best man for the job and he was going to get a contract extension. Of course, depending on who you speak to, there's the other side to the story. And the other side to the story is that they went out and spoke to lots of different candidates. Everybody knows who they are. I don't need to go through all the names. And for whatever reason, they couldn't agree a deal with one of the other candidates. So they went back to Erik ten Hag. They went out, flew to Ibiza, interrupted his summer holiday, sat down, spoke with him and said, Erik, you know what, actually, you are the man. This is the plan for the future. We're going to make some changes. You're going to get some new assistant managers. We're going to give you more money to spend in the summer. There was going to be a reboot. Now, 7 games into the season, the reboot doesn't appear to be working. But to be fair to Ineos, I don't think they judged Erik ten Hag on just that FA Cup final win against City.
Right, but they did go and speak to a load of other managers, as you've just said. Does that mean they have actually missed out on some viable options?
Well, who were they speaking to in the summer? Who they're considering? OK, Thomas Tuchel is still available. Mauricio Pochettino has got a job now. Roberto De Zerbi has got a job now. Thomas Frank is still at Brentford. The one name they were linked with in the summer who's now available, who wasn't then, is Gareth Southgate. We know he's got close links with Dan Ashworth. He's got close links with Dave Brailsford as well. I think it would be a big story if he was ever to become the United manager. I'm not sure whether some United fans would accept him being their manager. It would be a difficult sell to them. But I just sense at the moment we're talking about Erik ten Hag's future when he's still got a job. Normally, we don't like talking about managers' future and speculating on whether they're going to keep their job or lose the job. But I think in this instance, it's a little bit different because Erik ten Hag himself, in the summer, he sat down with a Dutch broadcaster and said, I am well aware of the fact that United have been speaking to other managers. It's not the done thing in the Netherlands, but it appears to be in England. They've gone out and spoken to other coaches when they already have a coach. So we know that United were speaking to other potential replacements in the summer. And of course, if this run continues, like all big clubs, they have a succession plan in place. They will be prepared for the eventuality that Erik ten Hag could leave. But I just want to finish off by making the point. Erik ten Hag is the great survivor. We've been here with him before. He's been in the spotlight. Everyone's talking about his future. Everyone's saying it's unacceptable. This can't go on. But every time, somehow, he seems to get a few results or performances out of the players, and this saga continues.
does indeed. Kaveh Solokol, our chief reporter. Thank you.
First, though, to the increasing pressure on Erik ten Hag after Manchester United suffered a humbling 3-0 home defeat to Tottenham, which leaves them 12th in the Premier League, closer to the relegation zone than the top four. We can cross live to Old Trafford now and speak to our senior reporter, Melissa Reddy. Good to see you, Melissa. What's Manchester United's position then on ten Hag as it stands right now?
Yeah, Erik ten Hag retains the full backing of Manchester United's football leadership structure, while there has been consensus that non-performance in the 3-0 humiliation against Tottenham here at Old Trafford on Sunday is unacceptable. There's no immediate plans to change the manager because the hierarchy are focusing on giving ten Hag, his backroom staff, and the players their full support to try and turn their fortunes around. So ten Hag expected to still be in charge for those very tough tests against Porto and Aston Villa this week ahead of an international break.
Look, Melissa, given that there was that strategic review in the summer as well, is this far too early for this kind of talk, do you feel?
I actually think the strategic review, because it dragged on for so long and entailed speaking to a variety of managers about actually the potential of replacing Erik ten Hag, it meant that as soon as there was the first sign of trouble this season, there was going to be increasing pressure and noise around his position. Because while Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Sir Dave Brailsford decided to stick with ten Hag, there'll always be that feeling that they couldn't have had full conviction in him if they were canvassing managers around Europe about taking over. And that list included Thomas Tuchel, Roberto De Zerbi, Maurizio Pochettino, Kieran McKenna, Thomas Frank, amongst others. And then ahead of the Liverpool game, which was here at Old Trafford at the start of this month, I sat down with sporting director Dan Ashworth and CEO Omar Barada, and they told us that while they actually weren't involved in the decision to retain ten Hag after that strategic review, because they actually hadn't joined the club yet at that point, that the pair enjoy working with him and they believe he is the right man for the job. And then yesterday, ten Hag told us that he's not worried about his future at all. He's not thinking about that because the powers that be and him, they're all in this together. They've made decisions about him staying on board, about the recruitment. They're all very aligned. But the reality is, if dismal performances like the one we saw against Tottenham continue, the club will actually be forced to act.
Yeah, and you say that as well, and it's another critical week, isn't it? 2 tough away fixtures before, of course, an international break.
Yeah, ten Hag has become so accustomed to critical weeks at Manchester United, and I mean, none more so than in the build-up to the FA Cup final, where the noise around him being sacked was actually turned all the way up on that volume scale. And we then know what happened at Wembley against Manchester City. They pulled out the performance of their lives. And ten Hag has actually been quite skilled in extracting those kind of displays when his job needs it the most. But Porto and an informed Aston Villa are actually very daunting challenges, especially in the context of how poor ten Hag's European record has been in charge of United. He's only won 1 of the last 10 fixtures on the continent. And then Villa, they're on a 4-match unbeaten run in the league. And when you think about United and how they've been struggling to score, with only 19th place Southampton worse off in that regard, it doesn't make for comforting reading ahead of an international break, especially with the team so low on confidence. And the intriguing thing is that actually ahead of this capitulation against Spurs that I was here for yesterday, speaking to people at the club, they were feeling positive because they thought that United's attacking metrics and their defensive ones had improved. We showcased the numbers actually on Sky Sports as well about all the areas that they were showing improvement in, and that actually they were underachieving by those figures. They should have been higher up in the table, potentially like around third or fourth. But then when you watch a performance like the one against Tottenham, where all the familiar bad habits come to the fore, the lack of pressure against the ball, being so easy to play against, losing any sort of control of themselves and the situation, then it does lead to wider questions. And if that kind of display continues, then like I said, the managerial landscape might have not changed since that strategic review, which doesn't give United many options. I mean, the only fresh one since then is Gareth Southgate, and the club are very aware that that would not elicit a positive reaction from the United fans if they went to hire Gareth Southgate. So while the landscape hasn't changed much, if those kind of performances continue, United have to make a decision regardless of what options are out there or not.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Thank you very much, Melissa.
Football, though, from the weekend, Dean and Sue. Sue, good morning. Dean, lovely to see you.
Good morning, yes. Thanks for that introduction.
Yeah, it's marvellous, marvellous. Right, OK, let's get into Manchester United. We will, of course, later on the Football Show, praise Tottenham for their performance, but let's start with United. It had been a bad week for them already. That goalless draw at Crystal Palace, Sue, and then the draw at home against FC Twente. Going into the game, how much did it feel like they needed a result in this one, and in the end they got the complete opposite?
Yeah, it felt like both managers needed a result. There was a little bit of heat on both of them, but especially, like, say, Manchester United and Ten Hag, because there's always so much scrutiny, and they're always, everything's highlighted, isn't it, when it's Manchester United. Looking back to the Crystal Palace game, the first half, they actually played well. They just couldn't score. Again, we looked at them last week where we were saying they were creating opportunities, they just couldn't score. But against Tottenham in particular in that first half, they were poor. They looked disjointed on and off the ball, just not playing as a team. You thought when they went to press, it was very much in ones. They weren't all going together collectively. And on the ball, they just looked so sloppy. Of course, it doesn't help when you go down to 10, but even with 11, they looked second best. And you think 3-0, it could have even been more. Onana made some brilliant saves, some misses from the Tottenham players as well. So, yeah, just a really poor performance individually and collectively from Manchester United.
Yeah, let's just pick up on one of those, Dean, because we will, of course, be debating the sending off in Ref Watch at 11 o'clock. But was the red card a red herring? Because United were struggling even 11 on 11, weren't they?
They were, but I think both Bruno Fernandes and the manager and their comments afterwards didn't skate around that. They didn't just hone in on that in particular. They knew that the first half was a pathetic performance. And when you're at home, as you are a Manchester United team, and you've got that amount of support all behind you, you need to know what you're doing. When you're up against the absolute elite of English football, you have to absolutely have an idea as players, as a group. Now, whether that is the manager not being able to get his points across, whether it's defensively or whether it's going forward, or whether it's motivation in terms of effort and desire, or whether it's the players themselves, and Sue's just mentioned, if there's just one or two that don't do the work and the right job and aren't at it mentally, you'll get picked apart. And that's what Tottenham did. Tottenham are in fantastic form, improved a lot already this season from last season under Ange Postecoglou. And it just looked like they were enjoying knowing exactly that they had the right ideas, they knew how they were playing, there was a genuine structure. I still haven't seen that from Manchester United, and he's been in the job a long time. And under him, I think they're a team of moments at best, but I don't see an improvement. You can see it in the performances, you can see it in the league table, you can see it in the -3 goal difference for a side like Manchester United. That there is no difference, and that's the big worry, because he's got plenty of players now that he's clearly had a big hand in bringing to the football club.
They're 7 points so far as their joint fewest after 6 games of a Premier League season. You love a stat.
I love a
on
stat,
a Monday
yeah,
morning.
I do.
So there we go. Let's throw the first one at you. I want to pick up on what Dean was saying, because our injuries now are red herring, because Tottenham went into it without Heung-min Son, without Odegaard and without Richarlison. the only United player, really, Luke Shaw, is still absent. And all the way through, Ten Hag has been saying, "Oh, judge me when I've got them all fit." And apart from Luke Shaw, they're all fit,
Yeah,
or all available for selection in some way.
They are, and I think that's the problem. Last season, that's what we were saying. We were saying, well, OK, you sort of feel for Ten Hag because he can't play the way that he wants to play because he's got so many players injured, in particular in the back line, the midfield area. So it was constantly changing, so he couldn't get any sort of rhythm. Whereas now you're thinking, well, they're all back fit. They're his players. He's had, 5 transfer windows, so he's bringing in the players that he wants. Everybody's fit apart from Luke Shaw. And we're still not seeing the progression. We're still seeing the same errors that we were seeing last season, whether that's, not finishing off the chances, whether that's getting into the final third and not finding the pass, whether that's being too easy to play through, too easy to be countered against. We've seen that again and again. So things have to change and they have to start changing, because I think Manchester United fans, there was a lot of them that have really stuck by Ten Hag because they don't want to keep seeing change. They don't want to keep seeing another manager go and another one come in, and it's all got to happen again. But I think even now, those supporters of Ten Hag are starting to wear thin. They're starting to be frustrated with what they're seeing on the pitch.
Because, Dean, the last time United lost consecutive league games at Old Trafford, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was sacked shortly after. That was November 2021. So we're in perilous position. No one wants to see a manager sacked. We'd rather they kind of pull a rabbit out of the hat here. But is there a rabbit and is there a hat for Erik Ten Hag?
Well, he seems to have many of them. I know that, but it's no secret that the club were looking elsewhere in the summer, and he looks like a man under severe pressure all the time. And I think
he's got the hat.
He has got
Look, he's got the hat. We just need the rabbit.
And I just think he did go through a period last season where some of his comments made him look slightly deluded, because we're all watching it. And he's really trying to pick up the positives. He's really trying to keep on side with the players and keep that positivity within his group. But even more so, even at the start of this season, it looks like he knows that it's wrong. He's not an unintelligent man. He's done very well in his coaching career. His Ajax team was superb. So he'll watch the games. He'll understand what's the problem. Probably his biggest worry is, why can't I motivate these players to do the small details that are so crucial at this level that all of a sudden just drop on his lap. Yesterday you were like, wow, that performance from sort of nowhere. They've had a reasonable start to the season, and he must be thinking, well, what's the next thing I've got to try to get the best out of these players?
Yeah, because, Christian Eriksen, I think, came out with some... There have been comments, especially after the Twente game, that the players weren't hungry enough. That is hugely concerning, because they're playing for Manchester United.
That's worrying, because that's the minimum, isn't it, requirement when you're a footballer going onto the pitch, is that you always give 100%. Sometimes your passing might be sloppy, sometimes you might mistime things, you might not have the best game, but the least you can do is try hard. So I think if players are coming out, senior players are coming out like that is a worry. But I think when you look at Manchester United, you look at they're obviously doing things off the field. They're implementing a structure to make sure that things are better off the field, hoping that will then go down to what's happening on the field. And I think going back to what you were saying about, they actively went out and looked for a new manager in the summer. They spoke to managers, that, as far as we know. They then decided to stick with Ten Hag. And, I've been listening to things that he's been saying, that there's a good communication between him and the people above, the ownership. So that's the worry, that he's brought these players in. Like, a lot of those players are his players, and he's got a good relationship with them. So surely they must be trying for him, because if you've got a good relationship with a manager, you do try it. It's hard for us to see it, when we're watching them, we're saying, well, it looks a bit lacklustre. It looks like they're not playing with intensity. But they know this manager. They've got a good relationship. Why is it not happening? So is it something else? Is it something structurally? Is it something that they don't understand? Is it maybe the pressure of playing for Manchester United? I don't know. It's hard to put your finger on it.
Yeah, I'm looking at examples in my mind, thinking about them, and you don't want to have a look in my mind. That's very frightening. But I'm thinking of, in particular, Jadon Sancho, who looks very happy at Chelsea now and keeps tweeting about, or social media, about how happy he is at Chelsea. So, and I'm wondering about Erik ten Hag, whether there's something missing, the connection between him and the players. Just tell me, you've been at big football clubs with big egos or big personalities, or how much of a manager's job now is about micromanaging each player as well as the tactics?
I think it's even more important now than it's ever been to make sure that you have the right relationship with the players and are able to get your points across and for them to want to go out and do it. Now, I really did find that as I went up the levels in English football, the higher I got, the more opinionated we are as players. We think we know, because we're top players. We think we know what the manager and the way this team should play and how to get the best out of the players that we've got in the squads. And if as players, you're on the training pitch every day and you do not think that what the manager's trying to do is right, we're not easy to deal with. We're not. We will get together and we will disagree with what he's trying to do. If there's things he'll say, we'll pick up on it. And if you form little groups, and that can happen very easily, it's very then difficult to have a full group that's backed with the manager. If you've got breakaway groups, which I don't know because I'm not in there, but from my experience, that is what I feel is the issue at Manchester United. Is I think there'll be certain players that are just not having him as a manager. They're just not, or as a person. Because too often, there's too many players that you watch and you go, you just don't care. You don't, because you would try harder, you would make sure that you're trying to implement what the manager's asking of you, and they're not.
How do you get them to care?
Well,
because they're playing for Manchester United in the Premier League.
Exactly,
You would think, an outsider looking in, wow, OK, I'm going to care. It doesn't matter who's in charge, I'm going to care.
I know, but we are complicated in terms of, a lot of the players think they're the best and think, well, it can't be me because I'm the best, and if you don't agree with the manager and what he's trying to do, then it is really hard. And that's why it's so important the manager has this great rapport with the players and gets everyone on side, because we will go and bicker and you do go behind the manager's back and talk about the manager all the time. So you're under such immense pressure as a manager to constantly have these top players on side.
But that's the thing that I don't get, is the fact that he's brought a lot of these players in. So he must surely have a relationship with them. If a manager brings me in, you think, right, I've got a good relationship, I want to work with him. So then, if you go through the team yesterday, there's Rashford was obviously still there, wasn't he? Bruno Fernandes. You could go through a couple of the, obviously the big characters, big players, but a lot of them, you go through the back line, the goalkeeper, the midfield, Ugarte brought him in, young players. Surely they would want to be giving everything, showing that real passion to play for the manager, to also play for Manchester United. So that's the bit that is confusing me a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, he made a big call with Onana, didn't he? Mazraoui's brought in, De Ligt. You go through that list. I mean, I guess the big one that he brought in that hasn't worked is Anthony, and there's fingers constantly pointed in that direction. Why hasn't that worked? A lot of money spent for him, but you don't know what's going on behind it. OK, if you're Erik ten Hag, what you want is a really quiet week with just a build-up to a simple game at the weekend. Porto away in the Europa League on Thursday before Aston Villa on Sunday. How tricky does this look?
Incredibly, and I think that's probably been his biggest strength. I would say is Ten Hag. He's been able to produce a performance, a result from some of the lowest points in his Manchester United managerial career. And I'm not sure why. I think because they feel like a team of moments. It wouldn't surprise me if they enjoy going away to Porto and those players can perform, go away to Aston Villa and perform. It could work the other way. If they set up the way they did against Tottenham and the same level of effort and desire, if you don't have that at the start against these top sides, it doesn't matter. It does not matter. So it's a big job for him. And when you've only got 2 or 3 days to kind of go back into the players today and get it right? Does he go in and does he hammer them? Or does he go in and try and keep that positivity that he seems to have within himself? That's the big question for him this morning.
Manchester United's players didn't read manager Erik ten Hag's programme notes before their miserable 3-0 defeat at home to Tottenham Hotspur on Sunday. "I must be clear," wrote the Dutchman. "Only 100 will do." It was a demand made in response to Christian Eriksen saying after the 1-1 draw with FC Twente on Wednesday that their opponents wanted it more. But if Ten Hag hoped to elicit a response from his players, then it never materialised. 100? He barely got half that. United were worse against Tottenham than they were against Twente. Much worse. A casual look at the scoreline might suggest the game hinged on Bruno Fernandes' red card just before half-time. That, though, would ignore that Tottenham were by far the better team for the 42 minutes that it remained 11 versus 11. Indeed, at times it felt like Tottenham had 12 men while the only United player who turned up at all was goalkeeper Andre Onana. Spurs were already 1-0 up thanks to Brennan Johnson's early goal inside 3 minutes by the time Fernandes was sent off. The only surprise was that it remained that way until half-time. Ange Postecoglou spent most of the first half on the touchline with his hands on his head as chance after chance went begging. He didn't need to worry. Most of United's players seemed determined to produce the kind of display that gets managers the sack. Ten Hag likes to point to last season's FA Cup final win over Manchester City as evidence of what he can get out of his team. But they've also been capable of days like this throughout his time in charge. In a packed field of disastrous performances, this was one of the worst. "What I saw in the first 30 minutes is below the level of what we can expect from a Manchester United team," Ten Hag said afterward. "Even when you concede so early, you should stay calm and just stick together and stick to the plan. Then you would have a foothold in the game, but we didn't have this." United's collective list of offences was so long that it's difficult to know where to start. Players in red gave the ball away regularly, lost duels all over the pitch, and didn't track runners. Inside 3 minutes, Marcus Rashford and Alejandro Garnacho let Tottenham's Mickey van de Ven pinch the ball unopposed before the centre-back sprinted over half the length of the pitch in the straight line like a dad who had joined a children's game. In keeping with the decision to let Van de Ven run like Forrest Gump unchecked, United also decided Johnson didn't need to be marked inside the 6-yard box and he tapped in at the back post. A marauding run through United's soft centre and a relatively simple finish, it was almost a carbon copy of the goal Twente scored 4 days earlier. If Ten Hag's pre-match rallying cry didn't act as a wake-up call, neither did the Spurs goal. Onana made saves from James Maddison and Timo Werner. In between, Johnson hit the post. Then it went from bad to worse. Fernandes slipped as he tried to close down Maddison and flung out a leg. It ended up looking high and reckless, and VAR Peter Banks stuck with Chris Kavanagh's on-field decision to show a straight red card. To compound the problem, Kobbie Mainoo limped off with an injury soon after. Ten Hag's response was to throw on defensive midfielder Casemiro at half-time, but there was another setback barely 2 minutes after the restart. The Brazil international lost a 50-50 challenge on the halfway line. Lisandro Martinez attempted a wild swipe, and seconds later Dejan Kulusevski had the ball in the net to make it 2-0. United briefly began to start playing, but it was too late and it wasn't long before the game was over. Casemiro lost pace from a corner and his flick-on was met by Dominic Solanke again completely unmarked to score from underneath the crossbar in the 77th minute. Spurs have never had it so easy away from home. They turned up having recorded just 3 away league victories since November 2023 and ended the afternoon dancing in front of their fans in the Manchester rain. Postecoglou's post-match assessment highlighted everything United were not. "We showed real belief and conviction in our football," he said. "Aggressive in everything with the ball, without the ball." With the score at 3-0 and more than 15 minutes to play, the exodus of United fans began. It was a miracle they lasted so long. After such a miserable defeat, the obvious question is how long Ten Hag will last. There has been some improvement this season, but it's now just 3 wins from 8 to start the campaign. This week holds tough trips to FC Porto and Aston Villa before the international break, and 2 more performances like this one will crank up the pressure even further. Much of the goodwill that Ten Hag has built up with fans after winning 2 trophies is rapidly eroding. There were scattered boos at full-time, but no show of full mutiny as Ten Hag disappeared down the tunnel. As his new bosses Sir Dave Brailsford, Omar Barada, Dan Ashworth and Jason Wilcox sat stony-faced in the director's box, there's a sense that the manager's future is on a knife edge. For now, Ten Hag is battling on. We made the decision from a clear review in the summer what we have to improve and how we want to construct a squad, but we knew it will take some time, he said. We need some time. We are all on one page or in one boat together. The ownership, the staff and the players as well. I don't have a concern. There is always a new game, it will be a new day, and it is also obvious you have to learn as a team.